to Brewing Success, where growth is the mission, change is the reward, and progress is the goal. I am your host, Andrea Gebhardt. I'm a former educator turned passionate entrepreneur whose desire to create impact has never wavered. I've spent the last decade teaching, mentoring, and coaching people on how to create success in their lives and businesses with proven strategies and systems that not only bring about change, but big results. When it comes down to it, teaching is my specialty, leadership is my jam, and inspiring you to live a bigger, fuller life is what I'm all about. This podcast will give you the knowledge and tools you need to brew success in almost any area of your life. You're going to walk away each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to step outside your comfort zone and into the next level of who you're meant to be. Now let's get into today's episode. Have you ever watched a tree in a literal real windstorm? Not a gentle breeze, I mean a real storm. The kind where the branches are thrashing and whooshing and you can't even imagine how something rooted in the earth can even survive it. And yet most trees do. We've seen it happen. They bend dramatically, they bow, they sway so far in any one direction that you're certain they're going to snap. But they don't. Why? Because their roots hold them. The tree does not resist the wind by being rigid. It survives the wind by being anchored. And there's a profound difference between those two things. And that difference, that distinction between rigidity and rootedness is what I want to talk about today. Welcome to Brewing Success. I am your host. And today we're going deep, not into strategy, not into tactics, not into the hustle. Today, we're going underground into the root system that either holds your life together when the storms arrive or leaves you scattered across the fields when they pass. This episode today is for anyone who has ever felt unsteady, anyone who has ever been blown off course and could not quite articulate why, and for anyone who has ever looked at someone else's clarity, confidence, and consistency and wondered how they maintain it. The answer is almost always the same. They have strong roots. So let's talk about yours. We're going to start with the first root, which is values. The word values gets thrown around a ton in personal development circles, and I think that the overuse has actually diluted its power. We talk about values as if they're a preference list, as if they are something you fill out on a personality quiz and then forget about. But your values are not a preference, they're a declaration. They are the answer to the question, what, in the end, do I stand for? Your values are the deepest root in your system. They are the taproot, the one that goes down before all others that feeds everything above it. When your actions are aligned with your values, you feel it. There's a sense of rightness, of integrity, of wholeness. And when your actions contradict your values, you feel that too. The quiet dissonance, that low hum of unease you can't always name, that's the sound of a root being strained. So here's something I want you to sit with. Most people cannot name, and it's actually kind of crazy, most people cannot name their top 5 values without stopping to think about them for a long time. And that's not a personal failure, it's a cultural one. We're not taught to integrate our values. We absorb them from our families, our faith, our communities, our schools, our social circles, and we carry them forward without ever holding them up to the light and asking, is this actually mine? Do I actually believe this, or have I simply inherited it? And there's nothing wrong with inherited values. Many of them are beautiful and worth keeping, but the distinction matters. The values you have chosen, examined, tested, and consciously claimed are far more powerful anchors than the ones you simply collected along the way. Chosen values become convictions. Inherited values, unexamined, can become constraints. So how do you identify your values? First, you have to pay attention to what angers you. Not the surface level irritation of a slow driver, which is totally me, by the way. Slow driver, slow aisle walker, slow walker in general, or a missed deadline, but the deep, righteous anger that rises when you witness something that feels fundamentally wrong. That anger is almost always pointing at a value being violated. If you feel incensed when you see dishonesty, then integrity is a core value of yours. If injustice produces within you this fury you cannot contain, then equity or fairness is a value of yours. Second, pay attention to your moments of deep fulfillment. Not happiness. Happiness is fleeting. I mean the moments where you feel most fully yourself, most alive, most aligned. What were you doing? Who were you with? What were you contributing? Those moments are a map to your values. Third, pay attention to your non-negotiables. These things you will not compromise regardless of the incentive. Those lines exist because something underneath them matters enormously to you. They're the surface expression of a buried root. So once you know your values, you truly know them. Not as a list on a sticky note, but as a lived understanding, they become your navigation system. Every decision you face, every opportunity that presents itself, every relationship you're considering, you hold it up against your values and ask, does this align with who I am and what I stand for? And this is why we have that expression, if you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. This is how people operate with what looks like effortless clarity. They're not smarter than you. They've simply done the work of knowing what matters to them. And that knowledge becomes a compass that removes the agonizing friction of indecision. When you know your values, the right decisions become obvious. The hard part is doing the work of knowing. So we have to take the time to identify what our core values are. One of my core values, and if you've worked with me, you know me, is integrity. I have a really hard time when people are dishonest. I have a really hard time when people's actions don't align with their words because integrity is so important to me. It's my number one value. And you need to know what they are. You need to be able to name them. And I want to encourage you to sit down and explore what your values are by looking at what makes you angry, looking at what brings you fulfillment. Taking a look and paying attention to those things and actually writing down those top values so that they can become the basis for decisions, so that they can give you more clarity, because that root is the tap root, the most important root, the root that feeds everything else. It has got to be established, known, declared, solidified. Without that root, we don't have a system. So let's move on now to the second root, your core beliefs. If values answer the question of what you stand for, your core beliefs answer a different and arguably more intimate question. Who do you believe you are, and what do you believe you're capable of? These beliefs are not always conscious. In fact, the most powerful ones rarely are. Were written in the very early chapters of your stories, by experiences that left impressions before you even had the language to name what was being inscribed. A teacher's offhanded comment, a parent's silence when you needed praise, a failure that was never properly contextualized, a success that was never properly celebrated. All of it becomes a part of the narrative you carry about yourself. And that narrative either lifts you or it limits you. Oftentimes, it does both, lifting you in the areas where you received messages of capability and worth, and limiting you in the areas where you received messages of inadequacy or smallness. Here's the insidious thing about a limiting belief. It does not announce itself. It does not walk through the door and say, hello, I'm the belief that you are not qualified enough, deserving, worthy, and I will be here to undermine your confidence all day today. Instead, it operates in disguise. It shows up as procrastination, as perfectionism, as the inexplicable reluctance to take the very step you know you need to take, as the voice that whispers that you're not ready yet, that the timing isn't right, that the people like you do not do things like that. People like you, that phrase, examine it whenever it appears in your internal dialogue, because the moment you catch yourself thinking in terms of what people like you do or do not do, you have found a belief worth excavating. Whose definition of people like you are you operating from? And when was that definition even written? And does it even serve you? Identifying your core beliefs requires the same kind of honest excavation as identifying your values, but it demands a greater degree of compassion because what you find may not be flattering, and it's almost certainly not your fault. Start by asking yourself, in the areas of my life where I feel the most stuck, what do I believe is true about me in that domain? Not what I know intellectually, but what at an emotional, gut level do I believe? Do I believe I'm capable of financial abundance? Or do I believe that money is something that happens to other kinds of people? Do I believe I'm the kind of person who builds lasting relationships? Or do I carry somewhere beneath the surface a belief that I'm ultimately too much or not enough to be truly chosen? Write it down. Write it down unfiltered. Then ask the most important question of all. What is the evidence for and against this belief? Because beliefs, however deeply held, are not facts. They are interpretations. And the best thing about interpretations is that they can be revised. The goal is not to manufacture. I want to make sure you understand this. The goal isn't to manufacture artificial positivity, to simply swap a limiting belief for an affirmation that your nervous system does not actually accept. The goal is to build beliefs that are both empowering and credible. And that means gathering evidence. Every time you do the hard thing you believed you could not do before, you're depositing into the account of a new belief. Every boundary you hold, every risk that you take and survive, every moment you choose your values when the easier path was available, all of it becomes a foundation of a belief system that tells you, I am capable, I am worthy, I am becoming. And I'll give you guys a really recent example. I went with a friend of mine to a new place in town that's kind of like a recovery center. We're talking infrared, light, sauna, cold plunge, the whole deal. And when she invited me, she was just like, hey, do you want to do a sauna session together? And I was like, sure. So I showed up, bathing suit, shorts, flip-flops, thinking, oh, we're just going to go like hang out in the sauna. Awesome. I need to sweat out all the toxins from my trip to Mexico last month because I'm sure they're still circulating. Anyway, so we get there and we're not just doing the sauna. We are there to experience the entire cycle and collect content for the owner of the business to be able to promote on social media. And I see at the end of the cycle, over at the corner of the room is a gigantic cold plunge tub. Now, I do not enjoy anything cold. I don't like cold weather. I don't love cold water. I don't love it. Like people who love living in cold places, I don't understand it. I'll tolerate the ocean for a little bit just to like appease the kids. When I was little, I think I was immune to it because I could boogie board for hours in the Pacific Ocean, which is freezing, by the way. But I saw the cold plunge thing there and immediately was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. I cannot do that. I can't even stand outside in a snowstorm and like pump gas without being absolutely miserable. Like I don't do well with cold things. There's no way I could get into a cold tub of water. I've watched my friends cold plunge. I watch them talk about the health benefits. I know about the health benefits. A very good friend of mine has a cold plunge at his house. And I'm just like, yeah, I could never do that. I have zero desire. So here I am now faced. And the belief was I can't do that because I don't like the cold. It'll be too painful, too uncomfortable, not something I'll enjoy. My body won't be able to tolerate it. Can't do it. That was the belief that I held about it. So we go through the cycle and the series of things. And here it comes time for the cold plunge. First time ever. And, you know, I'm also a risk taker. I'm also adventurous. I'm also, don't tell me I can't do something because then I'll prove you wrong. And it came time for the cold plunge. And literally I was like, can we just stop recording? Why don't you just get her getting in there? I was already trying to come up with all these excuses in my mind so I could get myself out of it. And then I stuck my toe in, which is probably like a terrible idea to like put your toe in. It's just kind of like smelling alcohol before you take a shot. If you smell it, you're not going to want to drink it. If you put your toe in ice cold water, you're probably not going to want to get in, but I did. And then I got in and I felt my breath be taken away from me and I submerged. And everything was tight from my chest up. Everything was like tight. I felt like this heaviness in my jaw. Like I didn't feel like I was clenching my jaw, but I felt like this heaviness in my jaw. And I looked at my girlfriend who sat in the tub across from me, like straight in the eyes and just like mimicked her like breathing pattern. And was like, okay, you've got this. You can do this. This isn't so bad. And I just focused on, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. And I sat in that cold plunge for 4 minutes, my first time. And not only did I feel amazing getting out, but I felt so accomplished because I just did something I thought I could never do. And that sense of accomplished, breaking through that limiting belief and now knowing that I've done it and I can do it and I can go longer and I can reap the benefits. There's probably no maximum benefits after 4 minutes other than turning into a popsicle. But that's what I'm talking about. Every boundary you hold, every risk you take and survive. That was me. That was a risk and I survived. Hooray. Every moment you choose your values when the easier path was available, all of it becomes the belief system that tells you I am capable, I am worthy, I am becoming. That's what it's about. Your beliefs are the soil your dreams grow in. Nurture them with the same diligence you would give any garden you depend on for sustenance. Lastly, let's talk about the third root, your boundaries. I want to spend a moment, though, before we really get into it on the word boundary, because I think it has an image problem. For many people, it conjures something defensive, a wall, a refusal, a closing off, and that framing misses literally everything that is essential about what a boundary actually is. A boundary is not a wall. A wall keeps everything out. A boundary is a property line. It defines what is yours, what you are responsible for, and what you will steward and protect. It does not prevent relationships. It makes authentic relationships possible. Because without boundaries, you're not in a relationship. You're in an enmeshment, in people-pleasing, in the slow erosion of yourself in the service of others' comfort. Strong boundaries are an act of, I believe, profound self-respect. And perhaps more importantly, they're an act of integrity. When you hold a boundary, you are living in alignment with your values and your beliefs. And when you violate your own boundaries, when you say yes to something when every fiber inside of you is screaming no, you're not being generous. You're being dishonest with yourself and ultimately with the other person. I want to take a moment to reframe boundaries for you. Boundaries are important because they protect not only where you are going, but they also protect who you're becoming. Sit with that distinction for a moment. Where you are going, that's your destination, your goals, your vision, the life that you're building. Boundaries protect those things practically. They protect your time. They protect your energy, your resources, your focus. When you allow every request, every crisis, every demand to have equal claim on your attention, you're going to find that there's nothing left for the work that actually matters. Boundaries are the architecture of your priorities. But who you are becoming is something more sacred than your goals. It is your character. It's the quality of the person who will arrive at the destination. And if you compromise who you are in the pursuit of where you're going, you may reach the destination and find that the person who arrived there doesn't recognize herself, doesn't like what she sees, because it's the journey that shapes you. And if you don't protect the becoming, you're going to build something you can't inhabit with peace. Let's also be honest and talk about why boundaries are difficult, because dismissing the difficulty doesn't do anyone any favors. Boundaries are hard. And when I talk with people about boundaries, like, yeah, I know I should do that. I know that boundary should be in place, but it's hard. I feel bad. And that's why we have to talk about this. Boundaries are hard because we're social creatures who are deeply, deeply conditioned to seek approval. When we say no, when we decline an invitation, when we refuse a request, when we step back from a relationship that costs more than it gives, all of these actions are going to risk disapproval. And disapproval for many of us activates a very old fear the fear that we're not enough, the fear that we're not lovable, and that we're going to be abandoned, which is precisely why the work of the second root, your core beliefs, must precede the work of the third. You can't hold boundaries consistently from a place of self-doubt. You can only hold them consistently from a place of self-knowledge and self-worth. And when you believe that you're worthy of the life that you're building, protecting that life becomes not an act of selfishness, but an act of stewardship. So let's talk about identifying where we might need some boundaries in our lives. Here's a powerful but simple diagnostic. Look at the areas of your life where you feel the most resentful, the most depleted, the most frustrated. Resentment is always a signal that a boundary has either been absent or violated. It's not a character flaw, it's data. It's your emotional system telling you that something is being taken or given away that you didn't truly consent to offer. Start there. Name the resentment. Trace it back to the agreement, implicit or explicit, that created it. And then ask what boundary, if I held it consistently, would transform this dynamic. You see, a boundary is not a punishment you give someone else. It's a promise you make to yourself. And every time you keep it, you become more of the person that you're meant to be. That's why boundaries matter. Every time you break a boundary, you give a piece of yourself away. So now we dive into the root system in action. Values, beliefs, boundaries, 3 roots, 1 system. I want to be clear about something. These are not 3 separate projects. They are not items on a self-improvement checklist that you complete and move past. These are a living system, dynamic, interconnected, and they require ongoing attention. Your values inform your beliefs. Your beliefs make your boundaries possible. And your boundaries, held with consistency, reinforce your beliefs and honor your values. They're a cycle, not a sequence. So the person who operates from a strong root system, it's not that they don't experience the storms. Don't mistake clarity for immunity here. The winds are going to come. The adversity is going to arrive. We know that. The losses, the setbacks, the seasons of doubt and confusion. None of that is canceled by doing the work. It's not the weather that changes because of all of this. It's your relationship with it that does. When your roots are strong, you are able to bend without breaking. You grieve. You can grieve without dissolving. You can fail without collapsing. You face the wind and you remain standing, not because you're rigid, but because you're anchored. Because somewhere beneath the surface, there's a system of values you have claimed, beliefs you have built, and boundaries you have held that say, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, and I know where I'm going. This is what it means to be unshakable, not invincible, unshakable. Before we close, I want to leave you with something to carry into your week. 3 questions, 1 for each root. And I encourage you to write your answers down, not just think about them. You guys know I'm going to bust out my teacher hat here and say that writing externalizes the internal. It makes the invisible visible, and visibility is where transformation begins. So when it comes to your values, here's the question that I have for you that I want you to journal and explore. What are the 3 values that, if you violated them consistently, would leave you feeling like a stranger to yourself? And are your current choices, your schedule, your relationships, your work, in genuine alignment with those values? Or is there a gap worth addressing? When it comes to your beliefs, in the area of your life where you feel the most stuck right now, where are you feeling the most stuck right now? Health, finances, business, relationships, faith, where are you feeling the most stuck? What is the belief you are carrying about yourself in that area? Is it a belief that you chose, or is it a belief that you inherited? And what evidence exists, maybe evidence you've been ignoring, that a different, more powerful belief might be equally or more true? And then number 3, when it comes to your boundaries? Where in your life do you feel the most resentful, the most depleted, the most overextended? What boundary, if you held it with consistency and compassion, would begin to change that dynamic? And what is it costing you in energy and clarity in the becoming to continue without it? Take your time with these. They're not meant to be answered quickly. They're meant to be lived with, returned to, and revised as you grow. That's how the roots deepen and strengthen over time. And before you hit stop on this episode and go back to your favorite playlist, I want you to remember this. The world will not wait for you to have your root system in order before it sends the storms. It never has, and it never will. The storms come when they come, in the middle of your busiest season, in the early stages of your most important work, in the moment you feel least prepared to weather them. They come. But it is here in the grace, in that reality, that you don't need to have everything figured out before you begin. You only need to begin. Begin naming your values, even the ones that surprise you. Begin questioning the beliefs that have been limiting you without your full awareness. Begin holding one boundary, just one, that you've been compromising out of fear or habit or the deep desire to be liked. Start there, one root at a time, because every root you nurture makes the next one stronger. And slowly, over time, I promise you that what was vulnerable will become resilient. What was shaky will become steady. What was uncertain will become clear. The tree doesn't grow its roots overnight. We know that, but it grows them. And one day, a storm arrives that would have uprooted an earlier version of itself, and it stands because the roots hold. And you might be walking through something in your life right now that would have uprooted an earlier version of yourself, and you're here working through it, almost to the other side of it. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. That is proof that your roots are strong. That is proof that you're growing your roots. That is proof that the system exists. But we have to continue to develop it, because the next storm is just going to be more challenging. The next storm is going to have more wind, more rain. We're going to be asked to bend. We're going to be asked to bow. We're going to be asked to, navigate the storm. This is what I want for you. Roots that hold, a life built on a foundation sturdy enough to bear the weight of everything that you're becoming. That is why we're doing this work. That is why we are here. And so I want to say thank you for just that, for being here. Thank you for doing the work. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who is in a season where their roots need nurturing. Share your growth journey with a screenshot of this episode. Put it in your stories. Thanks again for being a part of the Brewing Success community, where growth is the mission, change is the reward, and progress is the goal.